Well, thank you, Leela. And it's a new moon, which means it's actually going to be very dark tonight and for the next couple nights. And then you'll get treated with a waxing crescent moon that'll be rising as we go through the weekend. You'll be able to see that. But tonight it will be very dark. And if the skies are very clear, this is the great time to see those fainter objects that are often lost in the moonlight. And I wanted to revisit one of the most appropriate constellations for this time of year, this month that we're in, plus this kind of weather where all the dandelions and every flower seems to be exploding. I can't believe that about a week ago there was actually snow in some corners of the fields around here, because right now it feels like we're in the middle of summer. So with that in mind, I want to give you a constellation that we've talked about a while ago, but it's time to revisit the goddess of flowers, the constellation known as Virgo. And then I want to talk about another constellation that is just starting to appear in our late night skies. So let's see if we can get to with Stellarium. And if you hold on, I need the ability to share a screen. Leela, I don't have that power right now.
Oh,
I need you to grant me the power.
sorry, I will make you the host and see if that helps. So you should be able to share your screen now.
Yes, now I'm all set. So those of you watching, you can get Stellarium for free online for any kind of computer. Stellarium.org. There's also apps for your iPhone and I believe Android too. But this website and free software allows you to follow along and also plan ahead. So in the daytime, you can look at what you might want to see the night that comes and make a plan for viewing. So tonight's sunset, as we're getting close to the solstice, we're about a month away from the summer solstice, and our days are very long, and our sunset's not until 8:15 tonight. So I'm going to fast forward time in Stellarium, and you can see it was set up to show you right now. But if you hit the L button or the fast forward button, you can go through time quickly, and we get to watch a sunset. Now, some things that haven't changed in the sky is that Venus will still be visible in the sky. But it's all changing in position now. Things are rearranging themselves based on the seasons, and Venus is going to be visible early, but still in a different place every night from the night before. So let's slow down time a little bit. Now that we're just past 8:10, we'll see when Venus pokes out in the Stellarium sky. Not high up in the sky as it was earlier. Let's go a little faster. Hold on a second. Wow, that tree. Sorry, folks. I have to fade the background. Venus is so low that in our artificial background in Stellarium, that tree was blocking the view. So I put that highlight on it. So this is something that you may be encountering now. Venus is still in the sky, but as Venus is approaching the direction of the sun, it's getting harder and harder to see. And that tree, of course, is simulated. Can't do anything about it except make it disappear. But you can see how close to the horizon Venus is when it starts to become visible. And you probably, if you have a good view, if you have the ability to get out to a place where there's a level western horizon and not that big digital tree in the way, you might also see Mercury and Venus tonight in a conjunction. This is a very cool thing that is going to look like this only tonight because Mercury is the fastest moving of the planets. And it's only going to zoom by. And let me just show you what it's going to look like for the next few days in case tonight is not the perfect night to see it. So here in the calendar section of Stellarium, you can advance time. And now it has May 21st. But on May 22nd, look at that. Mercury is going to be higher above the horizon than Venus. And that tree is still in the way. And on this is going to be Saturday night. Oh, what's that? That is the crescent moon that's going to be joining the picture. So check this out. On Saturday night or Sunday night, you're going to have a chance to see the moon do a little, dance maneuver with these two really bright planets. Venus will be the easiest planet to see. Mercury might require a little more squinting. It's just not as bright, and it's always out in the twilight. So that's one of the tricks with Mercury. That's why it's the hardest planet to see. You never see it far from the sun. But over the weekend, you're going to get a chance to see something quite beautiful if you are lucky enough to not have this tree in the way. No, just kidding. If you're lucky enough to have a very good view of the western horizon. So if you know of a place in your neighborhood where you can drive up onto a ridge or hike up to the top of a mountain and look to the west, you're going to want to get there for Saturday night or Sunday night and watch this beautiful conjunction if the weather is clear. This kind of thing happens all the time if you watch the planets. We've been watching Venus for months now, and Venus is about to leave. Mercury is going to be in our sky for only a couple of weeks because, as I'll go through time, you'll see it gets out there farther from the sun. But by the beginning of June, you can see that it starts returning towards the direction of the sun. And now I've taken you an entire month into the future, but I want you to realize that Mercury did that little loop as it goes around the corner, so to speak, around the racetrack that it takes around the sun. And it's never visible for very long, less than a month this year. But I'm stepping through so you can see the movement of the planets. And here is where they're going to be tonight. Let's see if I can return things back to the way they're supposed to be. So Venus and Mercury sitting in a tree, Kissing. No, sorry, I can't resist. I always make that silly thing when I'm teaching kids in the planetarium when there's a conjunction. That is the way I teach kids what conjunctions are. Hopefully it's memorable. But let's not spend all our time looking at those planets. I want to talk about what else is in the sky. And we have some very bright stars like Procyon from the little dog. We still have the heads of the Gemini twins over here. And up high, the heart of the lion, Regulus, also possibly visible before it's fully dark. But I want to look over towards the southeast and look for this star called Spica, a very bright bluish color star. That's the brightest star of the constellation Virgo. And Virgo means the virgin in Latin, but if you've watched our previous planetarium broadcasts, you may know that Virgo is associated with a lot of different goddesses. In Egypt, they associated this constellation with Isis, the goddess of fertility. And in Babylon and Sumer, they associated her with Ishtar, the goddess of a different kind of fertility, not so agricultural, but more biological. And then if you lived in ancient Greece, you would have known her as the goddess Persephone. And Spica is by far the brightest star, but because tonight is a moonless night, this is a good chance to see all of the goddess in the sky. So now I'm advancing time so that we're about 9:45, little before 10 o'clock tonight. That's when the sky will finally get dark. I still have the highlight on Spica here, but I have an illustration that I can use. Now, if you use Stellarium, which is a fine program, useful so many ways, they have this illustration built in for Virgo. And it doesn't really match the stars in my imagination. You can do the connect the dot line that they do in Stellarium too, but then it looks like she broke her leg or something like that. That's a very weird shape. But I will show you the shape that I like to see with my imagination, and hopefully some of you will disagree with me, and I will make you go outside and go and see your own version of Virgo, and then you tell me if you like my version or if you have a better version that you make yourself, because that's the whole fun of imagining pictures in the stars. There isn't a right way to see any particular constellation, and I always encourage everyone to use their own imaginations. But a couple of years ago, in 2018, the Fairbanks Museum did something quite astounding. The entire crew at the Fairbanks Museum managed to pull off an event where we broke the Guinness World Record for the world's largest astronomy lesson. And I was grateful to be the presenter at that lesson. And in order to talk about the constellation Virgo, now mind you, this was 2 years ago, I did a little connect the dot image with this constellation. And I'm going to show that picture to you now. This is from a couple of years ago. What you'll notice is that year, in 2018, there were 2 planets passing through the constellation of Virgo during the August presentation where we broke the Guinness World Record. So let me show you what it looked like that year. And I hope you can see, this is my own personal illustration of the goddess of Persephone or Ishtar or Isis, the lady that looks like she's in the stars. Now, the part that's hardest to see is her eyes. But you can see these 2 faint stars where her eyes would be, and a little star that maybe makes a mouth shape, you know, like in an O. She doesn't look happy because if you know the story of Persephone, she has to go into the underworld to live with Hades for half of the year. But she appeared in our sky during the spring, and now that the flowers are blooming, it must be because the goddess of flowers is back in town again. And that's part of the myth of Persephone. And of course, the constellation Virgo is only visible during the spring and summer months. And when fall comes, the sun blocks her from our view. So you can see why the ancient Greek story of Persephone having to live half of the year in the land of the dead and half of the year in the land of the living sort of perfectly matches the path of this constellation in our sky. And during the late summer, her head is closer to the ground than her feet. So as summer turns into fall, you can watch the constellation Virgo make a head dive down into the ground, and she looks like she's disappearing under the horizon just in time for the leaves to fall off of the trees. So I love that story. It's one of the best ways to connect the seasons with the stars. But I'll remind you, if you're watching now, Venus and Jupiter will not be in front of Virgo this year. That's where those planets were in August of 2018. And it just goes to show you how much planets change their positions from year to year. There isn't a particular season for seeing any particular planet because they wander through these constellations with their own prerogative, their own timing. And that's where the word planet comes from. If you haven't heard it before, the word planet is derived from an ancient Greek word that means more or less the same thing as vagabond, hobo. Planetes is the ancient Greek word, and that means a traveler. So when you see a pilgrim walking down the road with a staff and a knapsack and a cloak, in ancient Greek times, they would have called that a planetes, and or maybe that's plural, I guess. I'm not a master of the Greek grammar here, but anyway, these planets are always moving around, and they will not be with Virgo now, but there is a constellation that will have 3 planets next to it this summer, and let's see if I have time to talk about that. But one more thing in this illustration, Spica, the brightest star of Virgo, refers to a type of flower, a spike flower. So in the way I see it, I see that flower as detached from the rest of the constellation, something that's lying by her side or maybe falling with her into the underworld. And you will see that my version definitely doesn't match the version that's in Stellarium. Oh, there's some pictures. There's Isis, also associated with this constellation, and Ishtar, too, from the ancient Middle East, Mesopotamia. But yeah, well, wait, I should show you that picture because that's pretty cool. Although not from ancient Greek times, this is a sculpture from the Renaissance by Bernini showing the moment when Hades pulls Persephone down into the underworld. Ooh, that sculpture seems so alive, even though it's stone. What gifted talent there. However, that's a reminder of the story. And one more thing, just some more cool illustrations of Hades and Persephone from an actual ancient Greek pottery that's been restored. We have a connection too because her mom, Persephone's mom, is the goddess Demeter to the Greeks, or who the Romans called Ceres. The reason why what you ate for this breakfast this morning was called cereal is after this, the goddess of agriculture. So if you know the Greek pantheon, it makes perfect sense that the goddess of agriculture is the mother of the goddess of flowers. Ceres, Demeter, she's the one who negotiated the deal that allowed Persephone to leave the underworld for half the year so that we can have flowers outside at least for half the year. And boy, did we have to wait a long time this year to get those flowers. So in a couple of minutes, though, I want to go back to Stellarium because that's Virgo. That's going to be something you'll see pretty much the entire night for the next few weeks. But if you are looking below Virgo into the southeast at night when it gets fully dark, you might start seeing the first hints of a new constellation that will sort of take over the summertime skies. And it's a constellation that it will be a host of 3 planets this summer. And it has a bright red star in it that is often confused for one of the planets. So I'm talking about the constellation that we know as the Scorpion. But before I let me show you some illustrations of different ways of seeing this constellation. So let's go back to Stellarium for just a moment, and let me show you what it's going to look like tonight. Let's zoom out. Oops. Let's see. This is just a little bit before 10 o'clock tonight. If you look towards the southeast, right when you can see Virgo and Spica here clearly, there's Virgo, in case you there's see now here, just to remind you, my version doesn't have a broken leg. Okay. So you can look at the Stellarium version, compare it to my version in this video, and decide which one you like the best, or make your own, of course. But Libra, we talked a little bit about last week. Not so amazing, but Libra, if you remember the story, is made from stars that were stolen from this constellation that is just beginning to rise. And notice that there's a bright red star right here underneath three stars that are sort of arranged in a little bit of a curve. And if you see that, you'll be looking at what we know as the Scorpion, Scorpius, which is one of my favorite constellations. But that star, the red heart of the Scorpion, it has a funny name in its own right. This star is called Antares. And if you're a fan of Greek mythology, as you probably guessed I am, the ancient Greeks had the god of war named Ares. Some people say Ares, A-R-E-S, Ares. Well, that god of war is also the planet Mars, right? The Romans called it Mars, but the Greeks called the red planet Ares, just like their god of war. And this star is called Antares. And it looks like Mars. It's around the same color as Mars, and Mars can be around this brightness sometimes. So, long story short, the name Antares means not Mars. This bright red star is named not Mars in Greek. And that's so that you won't confuse it for the real Mars, which will be making an appearance in this direction later this summer or late tonight if you stay up very late. But let me show you what I mean as I'll advance time now. I'll remind you, this is a little bit before 10 o'clock. So if you're not a night owl, maybe Antares and these stars of the Scorpion are all you're going to see. But there's another identity for this constellation, not from the ancient Egyptians who made up the Scorpion concept. You see, the local folks here, the first Vermonters, the Abenaki people, the Native American nation who've lived here in Vermont for thousands of years, they see a very different picture in these stars. They see something that, oops, I'm going to get all these illustrations out of the way, something that looks like Vermont's most famous legendary lake monster, the creature that most Vermonters know as Champ. And in the Abenaki language, his name is Gitaskog. And that means the serpent with horns. And so what's cool about this constellation from the Abenaki folklore perspective is that as the night goes on, it looks like it's rising out of the water, out of the landscape, and it gets taller out of the water, out of the land, the longer the night goes on. But there's Antares, that bright red heart. And if this was Champ, this corresponds right where his heart would be. Now, just to get a little bit ahead of this is almost midnight. What are you folks still doing awake? Well, I'm going to advance all the way until the constellation is fully visible, because you'll see that when this is on the horizon in the south, it'll have to be 2:30 in the morning. But just wait. In August, it'll be dead center as soon as it gets dark. So I told you this is a bit of a sneak preview. To see the entire constellation, you've got to wait until mid to end of summer. But you can already see a piece of the constellation tonight as soon as the sky gets dark down in the southeast. And over here, these bright stars are planets, Saturn and Jupiter. And way over here, planet Mars. So this summer, here's sneak preview of coming attractions. This summer, you're going to get to see a very special episode of Dancing with the Stars, starring 3 planets, Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter. And this is what they'll look like in the sky during the middle of the night or evenings of August and end of summer, with the Milky Way in the background and the entire Scorpion or Champ lake monster visible on the horizon. So just to finish that thought, I'm going to turn off Stellarium for a second, and I'm going to show you some quick illustrations of that lake monster as imagined by me when we did our Guinness Star Show. So I'm going to put up these pictures. Give me a second here, and we're about to wrap things up. But there is the part of the sky that features the scorpion, as if you could see it zoomed in. And in my imagination, this is how I see Champ in those same stars. Maybe a little silly looking with his long horns on his head and his big red heart and his long tail. That's how you spell Gitaskogak. Champ is, of course, not the Abenaki word, but a nickname coming from the fact that he lives in Lake Champlain, of course. But the Abenaki folks never called that lake Lake Champlain until after 1609. That's always been a lake called Bitolbegok in the Abenaki language. So another cool connection. Those kids who are watching this who may be fans of Moana, in that movie, they did use a lot of real concepts from Polynesian and Hawaiian folklore. And among them is that there is a fish hook in the stars. Maui's big fish hook that Moana sees as a beacon to help her guide her boat to Maui's island is a real thing in Hawaiian culture. And it's actually the same stars that we see as the tail of Champ or the tail of the scorpion. And there's Antares, but here's the scorpion, at least in my imagination. A creature that was dreamed up by the ancient Egyptians who actually lived in a place where scorpions lived, and they had to worry about them being in their sandals in the morning when they put them on. And so seeing a scorpion in Egypt was everyday kind of thing. And the Greeks adopted that story from the Egyptians and kept it alive in their time too. But the Abenaki folks didn't see scorpions in Vermont until they got Discovery Channel on cable. So scorpions do not live here natively. Unless you go to a pet shop, you're not going to see one in Vermont. So there wouldn't have made sense for the Abenaki folks to envision a scorpion in the constellation that we know as Scorpius. And no, Saturn will be nearby, but not exactly in that position, because remember, even Saturn, the slowest moving planet, is in a different position every year. And that's where it was 2 years ago during our Guinness World Record setting astronomy event. So let me stop that. And you have a lot of things to look forward to seeing, but tonight you can see Virgo, and because the sky will be dark without a bright moon, maybe you can see her plaintive eyes staring at you from the starry night sky. And one more little plug for a Vermont connection. Of course, Persephone, the constellation Virgo's inspiration for the ancient Greeks, is a character in the Tony Award-winning musical written by singer-songwriter from Vermont, Aeneas Mitchell, Hadestown. So I haven't had a chance to see it, but I've heard a lot of the songs, and it's pretty cool. You know, if you connect that to that constellation, you can listen to the soundtrack while you're watching Virgo in the sky. And I hope you get out there and this warm weather encourages you to spread out a blanket and lay down and look up at the stars and just ponder what else is out there. And I hope you keep tuning into our little online planetarium shows, and we'll keep you posted on anything else cool that's happening in the sky. So, Leela, no questions floating in from the ether there? Oh, I can't hear you.
Sorry, that was my fault. No questions, but thank you so much again for all of your awesome information about the tonight sky and some of the things that we should look for, and obviously the folklore all surrounding it. So that was great, and it's a clear night, hopefully, so people will get to see these things. And yeah, again, starting in June, we'll start to have Tuesdays and Thursdays with the planetarium again. So, but enjoy your long weekend and get out there and see some of these things.
Right. Everybody get out there, enjoy this weather. We've been waiting long enough for it around here.
Absolutely.
All right, Leela, take care. Thank you for hosting, and everyone, thanks for watching, and keep looking up.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.